Hi to everyone again. Then we give a floor to the first speaker, Yurii Kharkevych, Deputy Head of the 1st Detective Unit of the 3rd Main Detective Unit of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. Hi to everyone present here. I would like to express the words of appreciation to our defending forces who gave me personally and all present here to have these discussions on this so extremely important topic. That's why thank you. Thank you, organizers, for invitation. Thank you, international partners, to be present here. Regarding the topic of our today's discussion, it's extremely important because it's worth mentioning that the corruption is not just a crime, is, so to say, it also leads to prolongation of the war, and it's also about depreciation of the lives that have already been given in this war. We have been actively interacting with national level authorities, local authorities, regional authorities, with civil society in order to achieve our joint goal to overcome external enemy and internal enemy, including corruption. The National Bureau, in cooperation with NACP, has provided its propositions, its feedbacks regarding corruption risks which we face when we instigate criminal acts, criminal activities. We face some challenges on relevant stages. They are related. They have been identified by the NACP, and they are related to certain stages of the recovery process. They have already been identified and grouped in the presentation. The challenges have been also identified. I'm grateful to today's speakers because they were quite precise in describing problems in legislation, problems in full absence of effective instruments. I welcome an initiative regarding definition of prices in the construction sector, because during the pre-trial investigations we have cooperated with State Audit Service, with State Ministry of Economy, with Prozoro, state enterprise, because with them we have identified risks and problems which have been on the table since the full-scale invasion because of some changes made into legislation, specifically regulations on simplification of procurements during the martial law. So we worked with them and tried to mitigate risks as much as possible regarding criminal corruption acts which are being committed during the recovery stage. It shall be mentioned those acts related to bribes, receiving and giving a bribe, offenses related to the inflated price of construction objects. Here we have also quite a few challenges, including those that recovery objects, those objects which are subject to recovery have so many different goods that shall be procured there. So I think that the issue of of developing of a price development platform could be a very effective tool, but at the same time we shall highlight and pay attention to how prices are being calculated, how prices are being developed, whether indeed it's done in a correct manner, in order to avoid possible abuse of powers and potential inflation of prices. Regarding cooperation on the local level and recovery on the local level, I need to mention that NABU carries out pre-trial investigations regarding corruption offenses committed in the recovery sector on the local level and the regions. Those are quite, some positive cases, but also it's worth mentioning that prevention is the key thing here. So to prevent offenses to be committed, it will help to mitigate budget expenditures, because in such dire circumstances we need to flow each hryvnia at combating our enemy, rather than to flow each hryvnia at the pockets of our officials. So it's important to communicate with civil society, with anti-corruption specialists, because it's one of the important elements. NGOs and civil society, they cover such topics, sometimes even quicker than the responses being provided by the anti-corruption authorities. It's also caused by limited resources of the NABU. In particular, it's also about the number of staff and quite extensive mandate of the NABUs shall be performed, and the high number of regions which shall be overseen, high number of contracting authorities, subcontractors, bidders of relevant procurement centers. That's why, as I have mentioned, cooperation with the civil society is extremely important. Thank you for your attention. I will be ready to answer your questions if there are any. I think that we will have a Q&A session during our coffee break. And now I give the floor to Ivan Fedorov, head of Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration. The same as the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, the Zaporizhzhia region is located absolutely closely to the hostilities areas. Dear colleagues, thank you so much for invitation. For Zaporizhzhia region, recovery sector is one of the most complicated issues, and it's one of the top 5 priorities of our agenda. Why is it so? Because each day we have from 400 to 600 shellings at Zaporizhzhia region. It's 100. We have more than 100 kilometers of the front line which goes across the Zaporizhzhia region. And of course, we have so many different damaged and destroyed settlements. Of course, we have other settlements such as Orihivsk, Gulyapole, Stepnohirsk, which were completely terminated from the ground, and they were fully destroyed. But also Zaporizhzhia city and other cities, we have so many different damaged houses, both multi-apartment houses and private houses, which were fully or partially destroyed and which are subject to reconstruction and recovery. This is our statistics, and in order to understand the reality, we need to identify priorities. Of course, the key priority are people. People who shall be able to return back to our homes as soon as possible and try to live their, so to say, normal life, locating 30-40 kilometers away from the front line. Of course, we have limited resources. Financial resources are always limited, but not only financial resources are limited. For us, human resources are also limited. Just to give you a simple example, when on 9th September 2024, enemy started to use guided bombs at Zaporizhzhia, and just for a month we have received more than 1,800 of damaged houses. We needed to streamline the reconstruction process very quickly, because residents, of course, wanted to return back to their homes. We need to have decentralized recovery process in Zaporizhzhia. Why is it so? To mitigate corruption risks and to provide specifically tailored service for our citizens. That's why we decided to develop 8 help packages in order for our citizens to be able to use the solution which suits them the best. As an example, we provided material support of 56,000 of hryvnia for construction materials, which could be procured through Prozoro, and definitely 56,000 was enough for them to find a construction team, and it helped to reduce the period for construction. Or, for example, the recovery program, we simplified the procedure, streamlined it, and we managed to fast track the procedure to receive the funds from the state budget, but not we receive the state funds from state budget, but citizens directly receive those state funds, and they decide on their own how to spend those funds. And the third option, where we have recovery of municipal enterprises or subcontractors which have contracting agreements with us. So we have the 50% of funds which we allocate as a contractor of those services. So thanks to our international partners who fund a recovery program and not a recovery, new house. And in 80% of cases, we didn't spend new funds for the recovery of windows, doors, and so on, but they did it by themselves. They used this program, Yanovый Dom in Ukrainian, or a new house, and they submitted applications and received funds. And it means that in such a way we didn't just reduce corruption risks on the stage of documentation, but we also reduced our involvement on the stage. We just provided the service, and citizens by themselves decided what to do this with their funds. But at the same time, I think that we have much more problems in the construction market, so we shall apply a multifactorial approach. We have different corruption risks, and from one perspective we see corruption risk, but from another aspect we see that there are some limitations of constructed services and organizations which have their own limitations to work on the regions located near the front line. So including Zaporizhzhia region. So, for example, right now we have deficit on the drone market. When we observe this problem, relevant regulations have been made, and relevant changes have been made. So, if we look right now at the project documentation on the recovery, there is no profitability thresholds there. It looks like that there is no not beneficial for anyone, because at drones regulation, the threshold for profitability was indicated. So it's normal when you do your work and you earn some money. That's profits, because that's a profit which then, if you do not take into consideration any profit, then it will be hidden in the inflated prices. So it's better to be honest from the very beginning. So honestly agree on something and then honestly implement it. One more component, and that's the component of our team which is voted for us. We don't need funds, we need implemented product, and for us it doesn't matter who is going to implement it, and in such a way we agree upon it with our international partners. We are very flexible. If they want to build it by themselves, okay, we will fast track documents. If they want to have a tender procedure, okay, we agree on it. If they want to give funds to an NGO, then we will have a fast track procedure for this NGO. So we have a human-centered approach towards our mission. We would like to have recovery as soon as possible. Why is it so? Because if we do not reconstruct and recover quickly, people will flee and people will go away from our settlements. It's much easier to capture empty settlements than to capture settlements full of people. That's our philosophy. We are open to any communication, and I fully agree. Preventive measures, preventive works nowadays are much more important than to respond as post factum afterwards, because as post factum, as post measures, we will do it in months or years, but preventive work could be done already now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your accent on preventive function, on prevention of risks and the recovery. And thank you that you have shared your tools and your developments and continuing the topic of challenges of recovery on the regional level. And I would like to give the floor to the very local level of territory communities. And I'm so happy to give the floor to Mykhailo Netiazhuk, head of Fastiv Territorial Community. Hi to everyone. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the NACP for invitation and for this topic so important for Ukrainian state to be discussed today, for the research that have been presented today, because indeed, from the practical perspective, we can see that there are so many different challenges. They have been identified and they have been identified quite comprehensively. If I may, I would like to shift our focus of our discussions slightly. And what Mr. Johan Grossman has told us today at the very beginning, that now Russia is very focused at presenting Ukraine as a country where corruption blossoms and where everything what is happening should be perceived through the corruption lens. And speaking about corruption, speaking about recovery, recovery-wise, I think that our KPIs shall include not the number of corruption offenders who are arrested and detained, but our KPI shall include the number of projects being implemented with integrity for us to show as Ukraine to all partners that they can and they should cooperate with us. We shall increase the level of trust from the Ukrainian society to the state of Ukraine, to the authorities, and in such a way for us to strengthen our capacity to have our Ukrainian victory. And given this context, I would like to reflect to some things that have already been mentioned today, as I'm one of those few people, maybe Ivan also, who are honored and have this luck to sign agreements with huge numbers, where criminal responsibility comes not from the threshold of 1%, but the criminal responsibility threshold there is 0.01%. So it means that you sign these agreements, when you sign contracts, when you sign acts on receipt of work, you understand all the criminal responsibility envisaged by the legislation of Ukraine, but also responsibility and accountability in front of the Ukrainian people when you need to ensure transparency and integrity during implementation of this project. And again, I fully agree with what has been mentioned today by Sergei Drkach, the representative of the Ministry of Regions, that during the recovery process, we shall not only look at the quality, cost and price indicators, but also we shall look at speed, at the quickness, because what Ivan has mentioned, that's about our people to return back to their homes, but it's also about our capacity to use those opportunities as quick as possible, opportunities provided to us by our international partners, because the quicker we rebuild and recover, the quicker we will be able to renew our lives.
And let me quote an example, and that is a project, just one project in Fastiv in the framework of Ukraine recovery. This is what we are speaking about the speed. So in order to get to participate in the program, the estimates need to be developed. So let's speak about recovery of a hospital after it was damaged. So the estimate is developed, and while the bidding process continues, the DBN standards for shelters change. So we have to relaunch that. Then they revise sanitary requirements to healthcare facilities. Now in every ward there needs to be toilet. So again, we have to fully revise the tender documents. We got the approval, we go to proceed with tender proceedings, and now this is the 7th iteration of the bidding procedure. Why? because we try to do everything according to integrity principles. We publish on Prozora. All the requirements have been coordinated with EIB, with Ministry for Regional Development, Ministry for all the technical assistance is provided, so everything as it should be. The contractor, potential contractors, not always have qualification that would make it possible for them to come up with a proper tender proposal. Not always they know all the aspects of the legislation. Once we had to cancel a tender procedure because in the estimates, in the title, they didn't indicate the number and date of the document based on which they developed this estimate. All the other things were okay, but that was not included into the title of the document. They complained to Anti-Monopoly Committee, which, according to legal provisions, canceled that. And they canceled that second time because the company that won indicated that they can conduct this work not in 12 months but in 11 months, which we detect is a significant violation of conditions of technical documents, and so it had to be cancelled. Another situation where the potential winner, where they properly filled out the legislation, the amount was more than 200 million, and there was a printing mistake, and instead of 5 monitors that we install in corridors of a hospital, instead of 5 they indicated 3, which is a substantial violation of project documents, and based on that the tender had to be cancelled fully. There are a lot of such situations, and if we speak about quality, performance, and fast performance implementation of all the Ukraine recovery projects, it's important to now come up with adequate procedures. If we speak about implementation of some e-tools, it would be very good if those e-tools that we already have, if they take into account not only corruption risks, but also that with these e-tools we could mitigate those corruption risks. The standard form to be filled out for the contractors who know how to build but who are not knowledgeable about all the details of anti-monopoly legislation of Ukraine or all the nuances of the audit service. There is the electronic form where they could just enter the indicators, and that's it. We consider the price and we decide on the contract. Same applies to qualification requirements. Though when we speak about liability, accountability, we spoke about liability of the customer. Of course, a lot of things depend on them, but we also have other parties to the recovery process. And now we cannot bring to liability a potential contractor for submitting unreliable information in the process of bidding. They submit a certificate that they have successful experience of implementing this kind of projects, but they are not liable if they provide misleading information. Basically, that's about forged documents. While this is the liability of the customer, but checking and making sure that that's true, well, that's not accessible. And let me also reflect on what has been mentioned several times now, and that's the price for construction materials. There is tender procurement for construction work. There are 2 contractors. Let's say there is the potential winner with a lower price, and the price is difference is several million hryvnias. But the one who has lower price in one of the items like paint or, let's say, cement, sets the price that is higher than average in the market. Whether the customer has the right to cancel that and to decide on another customer. No, another contractor. No, because the total price is lower. And the customer procures not construction materials, but the work comprising construction materials. Again, here it is important to clearly set the rules. What should be done by the customers, because we have hundreds, thousands of such customers in Ukraine. We see we have 1.5 thousand communities in Ukraine. Thus, I agree with Ivan, the best option is decentralization of these procedures, but there must be rules. And again, there are questions, aspects that have not yet been mentioned here, but that needs some regulation, and that is the estimate-dependent wages, which is an important component of the estimate, and within one region, this salary may significantly vary. I know regions where the difference is 2 times or more, and it is determined at the local level, and it makes sense that at the national level it were regulated what we should be guided by. And then the aspect of liability or accountability of the customer regarding the quality of project solutions. Imagine a community, let's say Borivska community of Kharkiv region, where the amount of destruction is definitely more than 1,000 sites. There is need for recovery, but no experts, no specialists. Whether there are specialists there who are ready to analyze project decisions and undertake criminal liability with the salary of like 30,000 hryvnias. I'm not sure about that. So why don't we keep in mind another party to the recovery process, and that's the state expertise? Because every project, before we start implementing it, needs to come up with an expert opinion. If as customers, if we see that there was a state construction analysis, whether we need to separately hire an expert who is going to check that. I'm not sure about that. That's also a question open to discussion, I guess. I was happy to hear that we have the initiative to set up, to create an operator to procure recovery work. That's a very good idea, and I would be happy to delegate this honor of holding tenders for Ukraine recovery to a specialized organization. But again, now I agree with Olena Shulyak, who mentioned that in the process of recovery, the main thing is to get rid of monopoly. For example, if a local government has the right to transfer, to delegate these functions to an operator, or they may believe that they can do that in-house, that's also an option, then that would enhance recovery capacity, because then it will be possible to hire an organization that has specialists and the qualification in order to speed up the process to make it, to implement it at a higher quality level. As a representative of the National Association of Amalgamated Communities, let me emphasize that we are grateful for this research, and we are ready to participate in further discussion, developing amendments to legislation and other legal acts to make sure that the recovery process is as fast and efficient as possible, and also using this opportunity as a representative of Fastiv community, I appeal to potential partners, because now we have this task to get certified to confirm our compliance with ISO 37001. This is the quality standard that confirms mitigation of corruption risks. So if someone further on informally could give us some ideas how to proceed with that, we would be grateful. Thank you, Mykhailo, for the issues you have raised, for speaking the voice of communities. That's important because local governments play such an important role in the process of recovery. So thank you for emphasizing importance of transparency in decentralization of recovery process. And I see that the next speaker responded when you were speaking about frequent amendments and changes in the construction provisions. So now it is Kyrii, Deputy Head of the Architectural Chamber of the National Union of Architects of Ukraine. Well, it resonated with me that this is your honor to sign the contracts. I'm a certified architect who has the this is my value, that we develop these architectural designs, and I put my qualified e-signature and undertake all the responsibility to the society, Ukrainians, and our public authorities. In particular, we are visited by the State Audit Service. We see them as partners. I really liked it how Ms. Buslava mentioned that you need to treat public funds in a responsible manner. And for me, this is my honor to work with public funds, because we have this paradigm that everyone who works with public funds, that they are potentially corrupted. I believe that this is great honor to work with public funds for architects to build facilities for the community. When Oleg invited me to participate in this discussion, I read through the report and I asked this question: who are the experts who came up with the report? Oleg said that these are NACP and State Audit Service experts, and I said that that's noticeable because there is no voice of the practitioners from the market. And now I hear what our colleagues from local authorities say. So I believe that the general logic of this document is that there are potential corruptioners and how shall we punish everyone. But we need to think about how to protect the adequate architects and implementing agencies and customers and contractors who have the integrity. So I believe we need to revise the logic, but let me now reflect about what has been mentioned so far, using this chance that I'm the last speaker today. So what's very important, as Mr. Berlusconi mentioned, that Ukraine is not a corrupt country. Ukraine is a country fighting corruption, and I believe that we need to keep that in mind and to stop thinking about ourselves as a corrupt country. We need to stop sending this message outside, because in Ukraine we have a lot of integrity, and many of them we saw yesterday and the day before yesterday in the streets of our city, of our cities, of our country. So, responding to what Mr. Pavlushik said, he spoke about that it's important to prevent corruption. That's really important, and we could see how NACP prevents corruption. We could see that after adoption of the draft law that undermines independence of anti-corruption act, anti-corruption agencies, and NACP didn't do anything as a response to that, even though they could come up with their respective response to support the civil society. And I believe that it is important to support institutions no matter what. Even if they don't work, we need to be honest speaking about that. We need to make sure that they do work. For me, it was also my great honor to enjoy the process of preparing the anti-corruption analysis for 5655 draft law. That was 3 years of my life. And cooperation with NACP looked as kick-based democracy. Well, not so much a constructive work of the professional market, National Union of Architects of Ukraine, and the institution that works due to our taxes and is called to protect our interests. I want that to change, and my colleagues from NACP, I ask you to promote this topic. The fact that NACP has not come up with a proper position, a statement regarding the draft laws that were voted does not make it possible for me to hope for the better, but if the result is not achieved, we need to still insist on that. And Mr. Lyak spoke about comprehensive plans for spatial development, that they need to be developed, but the cost of a comprehensive spatial development plan is about 20-25 million hryvnias, and that's just about developing it. Promoting the idea of that all the thousands of communities need to have comprehensive spatial development plans with this amount of funding, and why have they not yet done that? Well, is that so surprising? Because previously, well, you could have conducted an analysis and see that this instrument is not going to work. Speaking about BIM technologies, that they are seen as a tool to fight corruption risks. Look, we've been working in BIM as a company. That's a very sophisticated software, and two companies sell that, one from Hungary, one from the US. In Ukraine, this software is not developed, and one license is $5,000 annually. So let's try to install those for all architects and for all local authorities, local governments. Look, let me explain how that's going to save us against mistakes in estimates. To avoid mistakes, the architect manually needs to build a computer model where the wall consists of brick and insulation material and plaster and so on and so forth. So this is done manually. The computers that could do that cost 100,000 hryvnias minimum, and the software is very expensive, and the salary of the architect needs to be not 30, not 50,000 hryvnias, and it's better if we transparently see the tax aspect. How we plan to do that? And architects, they are like flagship individuals. When they build this model, the information system comes up with a table, and then you can avoid mistakes, because if manually they indicate 3 computers, that's going to be 3 or 5 or a certain number of insulation materials. Then you cannot make a mistake, and then you can keep monitoring the prices and checking whether they buy the adequate plaster or not. So, but anyway, that's going to be done. In our country, we have about 6,000 architects, and 2,000 of them are working. We are extinct almost. Soon there will be no architects, and that's not just because of the war or the obvious risks now that our society is facing, but because of incompetent policy in the field of urban development and architecture. And this is represented in particular by those who spoke here, because when they spoke about splitting monopolies, let's speak about that, what it means in practice.
So Olena Shulyak and Chernyshov, what they have done? So they have united the data, and they worked on the opportunity of. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we are limited in time. So those who are not interested in listening what I'm saying, everyone is interested. So no, I'm interested, for example, but you're a little bit going beyond the context. That's a discussion platform for pushing your narrative. So what you're speaking about, it doesn't get a feedback. Actually, I can comment upon many things that you have raised. Unfortunately, participants don't use mics. Because if you are telling that, yeah, computer which worth 100,000 is needed, so yeah, I just purchased this computer last week for those solutions software to be installed. But I bought second-hand computer. It's great, but so you are speaking about important topics, but so how do they help us for as in control tools for us citizens to stop any abuses? Where do you see red flags? Thank you for your feedback. I value it so much. I read this study and read in detail. I discussed it even with Oleg. I agree with half of the conclusions, but I do not agree with methods suggested as recommendations to implement it. Speaking about BIM technologies, it's what I'm working with, what I know, what I have knowledge. So if we lead to this, we will just destroy the market. So I work and interact with people in capital repairing divisions in the local self-governance authorities. I know the profile of those procuring authorities. They are wonderful men and women, but they are under huge pressure from the side of police, controlling authorities, and so on. Let's give them even more of this workload, even more burden. I mean, this BIM. I know that it's needed, but this procedure requires timing, requires awareness of what is behind it. If we have 3 years to teach local authorities how to do it, if we have time and wish to support the market, because otherwise we can face a problem where there will be no architectures and specialists how to work with it. So regarding projects, is it about public funds? Yes, it's public funds. Yeah, I've read the draft law we are speaking about. Let's do it during coffee break. Okay, I will wrap up what I would like to say, and I will be happy to interact with you till 1 p.m. because then I need to go. So to wrap up, in order not to provoke everyone, including those, specifically those who are authors of the report. So there is great Fuller's concepts and the book, which is called Moral of Law. So the moral of law and of responsibility or obligation are defined. So moral of obligation is how to punish everyone, and moral of law is how to maintain integrity. So I will try to be positive and end my presentation on a good note. Let's support those people with integrity, those people with professionalism, and communicate and interact more with the market, local self-governance authorities, contracting authorities, and everyone involved with this process for years and years. So dear colleagues, at the end, I would like to say a big thank you for all the speakers, the hosts, presenters, participants for these fruitful discussions, which indeed again confirmed that it's so important to achieve integrity in the reconstruction and recovery processes. So thank you so much for your work. See you next time.